Good evening, brethren, and welcome to the 13th meeting of Staying Together. I hope that there's nothing significant about it being the 13th meeting, but we shall see as we go along. Let's begin by singing the first verse of the opening ode, and so mote it be. I'll play you in, but first of all, Ian will switch your mics on so we get you all singing.
Eternal Father's age, all created things were made. Heaven and earth and the shine. Here was the King divine.
Well, that's an interesting lesson, isn't it? Everybody's coming in at different times, and I tried desperately hard to keep with you. That'll come on later. Well, now
it's the internet
what
delay.
It's all about. That's what it's all about, really. The music starts us off, and you get into the vein. It's not the same without the music. I've often heard that comment in lodges, especially those that are used to having a regular organist. So how did music come into Masonry? In the 18th century, in the days of the Premier Grand Lodge, the lodges were predominantly situated in the Westminster area in London. Lodges used to meet at inns and taverns in those days. The lodge room would have been very basic. The tracing board as such would have been drawn on the floor or in the dust. There certainly would have been no organ or other instrument, other than perhaps a solo violin, or if you were very lucky, maybe a harpsichord. Songs were usually sung unaccompanied. Most of the songs would have been drinking songs, such as this one.
The health on earth, Mason.
Yes, the initiate song was a drinking song, sung all those years ago, and it's still as popular as ever today. So over the coming years, music became more popular in lodges. Masonic words were fitted to popular tunes of the day. They even sung to Jerusalem. The union of the two lodges in 1813 led to a standardization of the ritual, which became more formalized. Throughout the 19th century, more and more Masonic halls were formed, many of which would have possessed pipe organs. In the Victorian era, music was very popular, especially at home, where most respectable people would have had a piano or other instrument at which people could gather around to sing while accompanied by the musician. The church would also have had an organ and a choir. The choral music was very popular at this time. Many lodges would have had their own choir, and their own organist could have written special music to be sung in the lodge and at the festive board. I've seen and have some of this music. It's for large choirs and very serious, and at times quite lengthy and operatic. It's more like a cantata in some cases than proper music for a lodge. The length of the meetings was increasing considerably due to the size of the pieces that were being sung, especially at the festive board, where it was turning into a choral concert of semi-sacred music. I understand that it was Grand Lodge who played some part in suppressing this rather overzealous use of music in the lodge during the 20th century. Sadly, there was a more important reason for this, and that was the change in music making at home. Few people had pianos at home, and those that did couldn't or didn't want to play them. The gramophone replaced the soiree at home, and the number of pianists and organists began to diminish. Music in the lodge room began to diminish with it. and it was only down to the handful of organists who could and were keen enough to maintain the standards that the quality of musical performance in the lodge continued to survive. The most common function in the lodge room is the performance of a ceremony. A silent ceremony is a dead one. Can you imagine going to a wedding ceremony with no music being played at all? Or to a consecration ceremony performed in silence? Ceremonies very often contain processions, and these are almost always accompanied by music. When there's no music, the silence is deafening and the atmosphere flat. Music is there to uplift the atmosphere, increase the depth of feeling, and enhance the ambience of the proceedings, thus making an everlasting impression on the candidate on his special night. The annual installation ceremony is probably the best example of when music is required most of all in the lodge room. I know that the lodges who do not have access to an organist are the ones who are searching for one the most on nights of installation. This is because the procession of the provincial team into a lodge room in absolute silence is terrible. There's no warmth and glow, no pomp and circumstance, all of which are necessary ingredients for lifting the atmosphere of the ceremony, and atmosphere is what it is all about. Apart from the melody setting the scene, the pace of the music helps the procession keep in time and helps to make the movements meaningful. So we come to our first question. How many of you tuned in tonight have attended an installation with no music? 60% no. 40%, that's quite high, 40% actually. So 60%, right. No, and 40, yes. Okay, so if there is no organist available, then a number of lodges have resorted to electronic reproduction of pre-prepared recordings of the music being played. How many of you have actually used this system of playing taped or recorded music in the lodge room for ceremonies? So you've answered a lot of these ahead of time.
Yes, 61% have used it and 39% haven't used pre-recorded music.
That's very interesting, isn't it? That's more than I would have expected, actually. And how successful was the use of the recorded music? That's down there as well. 26%. It worked, but not well, 21, and very successful, 12. So that's lower in the levels. Okay. Right. One lodge that I played for actually used this system all the time. And it's a lodge which one of our brethren knows very well. He's sitting here tonight, and I visited it. And they have a regular organist. They don't have a regular organist. They have a brother who operates as a regular installed lodge organist, as there isn't an office of tape player. For the signing of the opening and closing odes, this system is better than nothing at all and can work quite well, but it is totally inflexible, whereas a live organist controls speed changes by the singers and alter the pace at will. Also, he will give you the starting up note. So here's the question tonight is on the subject of odes. Does anybody know why it's called an ode and not a hymn, an opening and closing ode and not a hymn?
Is it because it's not religious?
Correct, yes, that's absolutely right. The hymn, an ode is a poem which is intended to be sung, whereas a hymn is a song of praise and is more religious. And our meetings are not intended to be religious ceremonies. Hence, the poetic ode suits all types of beliefs and creeds. Well done. So what should the organist do in the lodge room? There are no set instructions in the ritual for the organist. He is left to his own skills to provide music that will enhance and ambience required. The minimum requirements are that he play the opening and closing odes and the traditional response to prayers of So Mote It Be. The majority of lodges process in and out, and this requires a voluntary or march of some sort. If the organist is able to extemporize, that is, compose as he's going along, he then has the advantage of playing the music such that it finishes at exactly the correct moment when the director of ceremonies reaches his chair. And he's at his chair. There's no sudden cutting off the tune in midair or abruptly stopping in an amateurish way. As happens sometimes. Some organists just play the odes and responses and do not provide any accompaniment during processions around the lodge during the ceremonies. I like to hear music played during the perambulations, but the organist must be well acquainted with the ritual in order to know exactly when to stop, so that he is not playing over or drowning any of the spoken ritual. What do you feel about having music played whilst you're performing your ritual in ceremony? Well, I'm glad we had a 0 for it doesn't make a difference. I think that's a very nice result, actually. It adds to the experience wins on that. Some people think it's essential, something that's nice to have, but not essential. I agree with that. It's not essential, but it's certainly nice to have, and it certainly lifts it. Right. I'm going to read on before we go to the answers to the next question, which you already answered already. So the organist who does just play the basics is much busier than a lot of brethren think. He's on parade all the time, and I think should punctuate proceedings with suitable music to add to the atmosphere of the ceremony. As a rule, I play while the candidate is moving and stop when he stops. When the candidate stops only to salute, I continue the continuity music without stopping, just softening down the tone for a few bars, then resuming the previous level afterwards. There are particular moments when you can enhance the drama and tension, especially when the hoodwink is removed from the candidate in the first degree, and as he sees light, the big chord comes and it adds to the surprise as he sees just where he's standing. I try to make the music suit the action with statements either by extemporization or choice of music. When the candidate goes out to restore himself to his personal comforts, there is the opportunity to play a special piece, maybe something that the candidate likes. One request I've had in the past was to play the James Bond theme for a candidate on his retiring from the lodge, as Bond was one of his favorite characters. That was in Worcester. Another solo spot is during the signing of the minutes. Here, a short piece can be suitably fitted in. As there are so few organists available to play at lodges who need them today, those of us who are still active are in great demand. And this means that we can be out playing as a guest organist as many other lodges during the week. Some weeks, oh, there's a dog. Some weeks I'm out 4 or 5 nights in a row, and often play for 2 lodges on the same day and in 2 provinces sometimes. So the next question now was, how many of you use a regular lodge organist? And you've got 58% down here. Now, I wonder if they're your own organist or they're an organist you bring in. But that's quite a good balance there, but it's still not enough organists. And the third question, which comes after that, if there's no organist, do you sing the opening and closing odes or not? Yes, good. That's very good to see. 90% of you still do it. You don't give up just because you haven't got an organist. Pitching, it's often a bit difficult. It's really quite hard to pitch the starting note without an organist present. But I think that most lodges manage to do it somehow and do it with gusto. One of our problems is going to play at a new venue where the organ is unknown to us or where something is wrong with it. Maybe it siphons, that is, a note sticks once you press the key, or just doesn't play at all, meaning you often have to change the key you are playing in or play that note in a different register. Quite painful at times, I can assure you. We all feel much more at home with an instrument that we know and can therefore get the best sound out of it. Among the new brethren coming into Freemasonry recently, I'm pleased to say that I've found 2 new potential organists who I'm sure will be very useful when they have passed through all their degrees. This is going to be very necessary in the future, as we are a bit of a dying race. To be able to play the basic pieces is not difficult to anyone who's had some experience of having played a keyboard. Have any of you attending tonight considered learning to play the organ in Lodge? That's our next question. Well, we've got 17%. That's pretty good, actually, have considered playing. So, I mean, if just 17% were managed to do it, they could help out. I think the recorded music works quite well, but there's nothing quite like being able to keep up with the speed that the brethren go off at or don't go off at and try to control it a bit. But anyway, well, I've not specifically talked about music at the festive board, as I think that is another subject in itself. The temple work and the bonhomie of the festive board are the 2 great contrasts, I think, that make Freemasonry stand out alone above all the other male societies available for us to join today. I mean, like Rotary and Round Table. There's not this wonderful contrast of being in the lodge room, learning the ritual and having our play and seeing the candidates go through, and then enjoying the like a reward afterwards of having learnt all that ritual and performed it, and also the candidate feeling that he's being treated very specially. Music at the festive board, in my opinion, is very much down to what the master wishes in his year, and the best that the organist can do to make it possible for him. In conclusion, there's no doubt in my mind that the place of music in the temple is very desirable, and to me essential for completing the ceremonial atmosphere for the candidate, be he progressing through his next degree, or for the new master being installed in the chair. As a last topic, I'd like to mention the effect of this wretched COVID virus on music in the temple. The thought of having to perform any ritual whilst wearing a face mask, to me, is unimaginable, and I would not like to do it. Similarly, we're not permitted to sing as it carries the possibility of spreading droplet infection. However, recent research has shown that if we sing at a Mezza Forte level, the droplet spray is equivalent to ordinary speech. Therefore, we can sing, but not too loudly. My way around this was to think of humming, because you can hum quite loudly, and you certainly won't spread any droplet infection through your nose whilst humming. So if you can hum it, you can do it, and there's no problem there. I wonder if any of you know there's a very well-known piece of humming music in a certain opera. Can anybody tell me what that is?
Madame Butterfly.
Very good, very good. Yeah, Madame Butterfly, Puccini. Now, before we go on to closing, has anybody got any questions?
Mike, you said about pitching. Is there any way of getting some kind of pitching device in the absence of a chord struck by an organist?
You only need a note, actually, not the chord, the note.
Note.
Because you'd all start off, if, for example, oh, it's switched itself off, I'll just switch it back on again. So you don't need any more than Hail, eternal, by whose aid. That starts you. The chord's fine, but you really don't know if somebody gives you that. It's like many a time we've sung the national anthem in Lodge and there hasn't been an organist there. And if somebody gives you a G, you're away with it and you're there. So for the opening ode, that's all you need. And in fact, funny enough, it's the same note that starts the closing ode. It's an A. So if somebody could play the A on an organ, or even just had a simple, you can buy these notes where you can blow it and you get the one single note. That would help you. And then at least you all start on the same note. And the one with the loudest voice would probably be the one who leads everybody. And there's always one who's got the loudest voice. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yes, just wondering how the humming might go. That's as if you don't know the words.
Well, at least you're making a song out of it. You could have somebody sing quietly and somebody hum. It's better than nothing. I mean, nothing's awful, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Anybody else want to ask anything?
Michael, should we appoint in a lodge a deputy organist who is capable of playing the sermon support music using discs?
Well, this is what they do in Solihull Lodge I was talking about. He's actually invested as the lodge organist because they haven't got the role of office of a tape player, and he does that all the time. He does it very well too, and he's got really used to it. And when I visited Solihull, sometimes I take over to give him a rest.
Yeah.
I've conducted a number of ladies' festivals, and for the singing of the song to the ladies, we have the accompaniment of a disc. And
Right.
of course, someone's got to be behind the scenes making sure they reel it up at the right place.
Exactly.
And we all start at the right place, because often the brethren want to join in.
Hence the reason I'm suggesting that they are trained and developed.
Yes.
Well, one of the ways this is happening more and more at ladies' nights now, people are not liking to stand up and sing solo. And so there's a very easy round that. You get all the brethren to come up and sing it.
That's usually what happens in my experience.
And that does work. But the trouble with mechanical things is starting it and getting everybody started. I mean, if you start it, if you've got it on a CD where you can start it, stop it immediately and put it back to the beginning, you can play the first sort of 2 or 3 seconds so they get the feel of it. Tell them you're going to do that. That's like playing the intro. And then from that, go back to the beginning and they'll join. And it just wants somebody to sort of lead them off and then they'll do it. It's
That's
better
like
to have
playing
somebody
over
lead
before a
us.
hymn.
Yes, it's like the leading.
Yes.
And you hold the note. But of course, the gadget won't do that. We can do it. And whilst I'm, see, what a lot of people don't realise is the organist is not just playing, I'm holding the note and I'm watching you all. It's like conducting an orchestra. To see you all ready, and then when I can see you drawing breath, I'll play. I don't just play, I watch every single thing everybody's doing in the lodge and then respond to it. And we all work like that, I think.
Keeping time is very important.
Yeah, because sometimes they race, and if they go really fast, I mean, I hate to hear the national anthem raced, and I have in fact actually stopped playing before now and said this is not sort of a hooray after the cup final. This is for Her Majesty the Queen, and let's play it properly and at this speed, and you'll take your time from me. But there is a technique which all organists use to actually get people back into speed, and that is to play louder than they're singing, and that usually works. You can pull them back then. You can do it without them knowing. But only once have I stopped when I was guest playing for a lodge, and I thought they were being rude about the Queen, and I just think it shouldn't be rushed. It should be sung at a proper pace, as George used to say. You will take the fire at the correct pace.
Yes.
Mike, thank you for that interesting presentation. It must have been difficult to interweave the talk with the music. One message I took away, apart from the fact that the absence of an organist, our organist in St. Michael's Lodge is there at every meeting, but he takes a break in November, and we can notice a difference when he's absent, when there is no music. So the point you've made that the organist's role or job is a lot more involved than most of us think. But my question.
Yeah, go on.
My question is, I heard you play at Coventry Cathedral, and it was exhilarating. And my question is, are the lodges, the acoustics in the lodges, sort of tuned to enhance the music?
You know, I've never really bothered too much about the acoustic in the lodge room, because it's really about the people singing and joining in and getting the feeling of it. I mean, if you're going to a concert, yes, you're all sitting and you're expecting a perfect performance and you're expecting something very special. But in the lodge room, I feel the specialness is all of us together and all of us singing. And it doesn't matter about the acoustic. What matters is that we sing together and we enjoy what we're singing because we're singing it together. And so that never bothers me, the acoustic, to be honest.
Well, thank you for an interesting presentation.
Thank you for your questions. Thank you very much. Nice to hear you.
Mike,
Can I just come in with a question, if that's okay, or a comment, please, Mike? You mentioned Solihull Lodge, and I'm very grateful you did, because it's a wonderful lodge, of course. And we're always grateful when you come along to assist us. You mentioned about the organist there, who we do know as the organist, although he does rely upon tapes. And of course, the reason that he can do that is because of the sound setup at the Noel Masonic Centre.
Yes.
It's absolutely superb.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, Andrew, very good. Absolutely
And
superb.
they should be commended on that. But there's nothing like the real thing.
Well, I think David Harbon does a wonderful job in Solihull, actually. And it's lovely to come and be given the chance to play, because I love to play for you all. It's just such a joy to go and play for somebody's lodge, because you all love it so much and everybody's always so happy and friendly. And that's what it's all about. I just love it. And whenever I play that, it always makes me think of you, Mike, because you always say a free and an accepted Mason, and that's absolutely stuck now, that has in my mind. Every time I play that, I can hear you singing it.
There's one thing that I miss since Chris, who's on here, took over, and that is at perhaps Sutton Coldfield, where Mark Fleming was there. And I know Mark's on here. I've seen him on here. I don't know if he's still here. And the intro that he used to give to me when I used to walk in, and that was brilliant. Thank you, Mark.
That was also Sprachzara Thruster.
Absolutely,
wasn't it?
yes.
And
I've actually try singing it.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't think Richard Strauss would have been too happy about that.
No.
But I have actually been a visitor as a guest of you to Solihull Lodge, and I did play that for you to come in.
You did. I remember, because I mentioned it, but thank you anyway. We're not talking about me, we're talking about music. And can I just say that Hilary and I had the pleasure of going to Puccini's birthplace, Torre del Lago, near Viareggio, a few years ago.
In Lucca.
We saw Madame Butterfly in an open air arena, and the humming chorus. It just makes the hairs on the back of your neck tingle. Absolutely,
it's wonderful, isn't it? Wonderful.
And the history behind the humming chorus is even more chilling. You know the
yes.
The scenery about this lady waiting for her sailor husband.
It's a very, very sad story, isn't it?
Very sad indeed.
Wonderful piece of work. And the music, of course, is super. Yes. It's between that and La Boheme.
La Boheme.
People will go between the two. La Boheme is also Your Tiny Hand is Frozen, and the whole of that aria there. I like the closing scene, actually, when they're waiting for the doctor to come. It's absolutely spine-bending stuff. It really is. Marvellous. Well, anybody else like to ask anything?
Yes, we've got a few questions that have come in on the chat.
Good.
I might even answer the first one myself, if I may.
Yes,
which was, is there a source for sheet music and music that can be used? In the members portal on the website, there is recorded music and sheet music provided by Peter Summers that can be used freely by anybody around the province. There may be different variants, and I'll hand over to Mike to see if there's easier ones to play in sheet music, perhaps in different sources.
Well, it's wonderful. Dear Peter has done a wonderful job putting all this music here, and we're very, very lucky to have him as our provincial ground organist. There is a simplified book. I wish I'd thought I would have brought it. It's in my music room, but I could find out what it is and tell you, and perhaps we could put it on the net somewhere or something. It's written by somebody else, and it's very good indeed. And all the pieces have been simplified, much easier to play. But if you use a simple system of just the melody line and you put just the chords above it, you can learn to play these chords. On some keyboards, you can just play the one finger of the chord and then just play the tune. And that's really not too hard to do, because once you start people off singing and you follow along with them, they manage very well by themselves. Barenboim once stood in front of an orchestra. I think it was at a prom he did it, to show how unnecessary the conductor really was. And in my past, I've conducted orchestras, and it's absolutely true. Once you've got them going, you can walk away and they know how to play. And they're getting so much cleverer now, they'll actually stand and play the whole symphony without music at all off by memory. So things are really changing. But I mean, he just went and sat down, Barenboim did it, in the middle of the performance, and came back at the end just to end it. So it's starting people together, finishing them together, or it's making the loud and soft. But if you ever play in an orchestra and you're playing in percussion and you're counting 158 bars and you've got to come in and go clonk on the timpani and make it really loud, and if you get that wrong, everybody will know it. So of course, a good conductor will look up and he'll just go a hand just like that, just to tell you it's coming. And you watch the conductor, he's looking and cueing people in. And I was saying earlier about looking at people in the lodge, and you do that. You look up to see what they're doing, what they're going to do next, and adjust what you're doing to it. And I learned most of this from one of the old organists. I'm just trying to think of his name. He's retired now. He's quite ill, but I learned a hell of a lot from him. And this is it. And you pass this on to each other, and then you put it into practice and you watch. And it's like so many things in life, you learn by watching and listening.
Absolutely. I've got a question from Andrew Lee. What's the feeling of how many more organists we need in the province to sustain our live music objective? And also as a follow-up to that, in terms of PC-based music, one of the issues is easeability and starting and stopping at the right place. Do you have any guidance on that or any thoughts on that area as well?
Stopping, I think, is not so bad, because as long as you end up more or less at the same place, that's it. It's just this business of cueing somebody in by playing their thing. And then they all go in. But if you just start off, I think the only way around that with a pre-recorded thing, Andrew, is to play it, to start it off, stop it back to the beginning, and then play it. I think you've got a greater chance of people coming in together then. You use it as a cue. You just play the first few bars, press the return button. You should be able to do it on a CD player without stopping it. So you press the start button, it plays it, then you just press the button which takes you back to the beginning of that track, and it should work.
And how many more organists do you think we need to sustain music?
Oh, well, how many lodges have you got? This is the thing. I'm out 4 or 5 times a week, and I'm thinking of reducing that because I'm getting quite tired of it now. I've done it for 20 to 25 years. And to give an actual number is very difficult because a lot of us play for 3 or 4 lodges a week. And how many lodges? Is it 130 meter at KMC, Andrew? He's not there.
I think he's
It's about
sorry, I am here. Yeah.
About 133, I think, actually.
Yeah, I thought it was near 130, so 133.
130 to 40 in the whole province, Mike. And my question
that's not all craft, of course, is it? That's a mixture.
No, there's about 130 to 40 craft lodges in the province.
Okay, so that's 133 organists, and that's one organist played for 6.
Have I got that wrong, Michael?
Yeah.
Go on then.
Well,
You're on
you
mute,
see,
Michael.
you need about 6. 2 organists would have to cover 60 lodges. So you're going to need a hell of a lot of organists. I don't know how they get around it. I really don't. I mean, there's probably about 10 of us.
So if
maybe
I've also made a mistake on the numbers. So Michael.
I think you'll find it's about 155 craft.
Okay. So 155 lodges, and we have about 10 organists. It's about 15 per unit, plus the electronic music, of course. So my question is, how many people do you think we should be encouraging to come through to be able to sustain?
The quick answer is a lot more. I think it's awfully difficult to talk of numbers because it's a bit of an impossible thing. I think a lot more, and that's why I say I'm glad of these 2 new organists who I know are going to be very good indeed. One of them's already beginning to play in a Mark Lodge, and I've sent him the book to help him out. And he is coming on really well, but of course he's got to finish his third before he can start. It's obviously we need more, because 10 of us are not going to cover 150 lodges very easily, are we? So we are going to be phased out eventually by the gramophone, I think. But the only thing is to learn to use the technique better. And as I said, I think the thing to do is, if you've got it on a CD, which is probably easier than having it on a computerized system, which is actually in the computer, unless you can do the same thing there, whereby you can just press a button and it comes straight back to the start again. Because that's how I would try to do it. Start to play it and interrupt it so that it goes back at the point where you'd hold it. And then that acts as a cue for them, because the cue is the thing that gets people in together. You can do it by playing a bit of the tune, or you could do it just by playing the single note, and then people would come in if somebody started. All you need is the note, really. Some people just play a chord, and then they go ta-ta-ti-da-ta-da-dum. But you could do that with just a note. You do that, and then and somebody just wave a hand and bring everybody in.
I guess one of the questions I was thinking about is there a process that we have already for encouraging people either to take up the organ or to join Masonry if they are organists?
Well, that's a good one, isn't it?
Because if we could find a way, for instance, of supporting people who wouldn't mind taking up the organ from a very low level, potentially we could bring more people up to be organists, or find people who are interested in organs from somewhere and then see if they're interested in Freemasonry.
Well, that's the obvious approach. That's a very good approach, isn't it? Yes, I think so. It's a question of finding them and finding people who've got the time and are prepared to come out and do it and want to join Masonry. That's the ideal world. But otherwise, it's a question of, as I was saying earlier in the talk, trying to get people who have some knowledge of the keyboard to actually learn the simplified way of doing it. And I can help people with that. And this book, which I wish I'd had by me, with these things, I think it was from somebody in Coventry who did it, but I'll get the details anyway. That's the only other way to do it, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I guess also maybe an organist lodge of instruction for people to come to if they're interested.
Well, I'd certainly be prepared to write some stuff for that to make it easy for them to play, because people who take up keyboard at all ages, and a lot of people when they retire ask me to help them learn to play keyboards, and I've helped quite a few people. And really, if, as I say, if you just know the tunes and you've got a bit of an ear, you can get by. It's a lot of fun. And of course, it's nice to be able to do something like that for the lodge. Oh, sorry, the last verse of closing, it doesn't matter, just sing what you can to it. Then after that, we're going to go on to the festive board, which I'll tell you. So I'll play you in then, you know what that is now. And then we'll start off with the closing ode. It's very difficult to keep time because all your times are coming through differently, but I'll try and keep up ahead or below you so that we all end together. Yes, I think if I play it slow like that, it works better. Well, just for the fun of it then, we'll go into the festive board. And those of you who have a glass handy, please raise it to the festive board now, as we sing one verse of Viva la Compagnie. I know a lot of you won't know it, but a lot of you will as well. And I'll play you in. Let every brother fill his glass. Viva la Compagnie. And drink to the Queen of the goblet repast. Viva la Compagnie. Viva la viva viva la viva la Compagnie. for staying in touch. I want to thank Ian Slessor for managing the session and Peter Manning for his publishing and printing prowess. And good night to you all.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
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 Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mike.
Bye.